Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Royal Academy of Engineering's annual, and goodness, so many words, annual Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Conference. My name is Rosa Morgan Baker, and I'm the Senior Manager for Equity, Diversity and Inclusion at the Academy, leading on our work with engineering industry. It is so great to be here with you all, and whether you're in the room with us, which we've got a packed room, fantastic, or if you are joining online, welcome. We are really delighted to have you with us. We have an exciting programme lined up for you today, and I'm really looking forward to the day ahead. I'll be your host. I'll be popping up at different points to keep everything moving along. Before we kick off, we've got a few points of housekeeping to share. The sheets on your tables or the link in the chat for those online will take you to the details of today's agenda and timings. Please note that this morning's discussions will be recorded and live streamed to our online audience. If you miss a session or if you would like to catch up a little bit later, some of the onstage insights, they'll be available on the Academy's YouTube page in the coming weeks. There will be staff on hand throughout the day to help if you have any questions or if you need any support. Some of us are wearing fetching lanyards, so please do call on us if you need. For those joining online, my fantastic colleagues, Chloe and Paula, are online with you and will be able to answer any queries via the chat. We'll be aiming to have our first break today at 11:30. Lunch will be at 1 p.m. and then we'll say goodbye to our online community and in-person attendees will come back for a workshop and networking this afternoon. If you're online, please do not have any FOMO, do not worry about missing out. We plan to continue these conversations later in the year and we'd be delighted to have you join us. There is no scheduled fire alarm for today, and if the fire alarm should sound, there will be people in high visibility vests that you'll be able to follow out of the building. The bathrooms are located on the first floor and -1, and our multi-faith room today is on the first floor. Both are signposted and are accessible via the lifts. If you're joining us online, I'm really hopeful that you actually know where your nearest bathroom is. If not, I've probably got about 2 minutes left, so please go and find it now. Today is all about community, so please do share today's event on social media. We have our social media handles, which is at RAE News, RAE Eng News, and Eng Diversity, so please do use those as you share. Some of today's conversations may touch on sensitive themes, so I invite everyone to listen and share with care. You can refer to our code of conduct, which is available online or by the registration desk. Finally, we have 3 fantastic Q&A sessions this morning, so you can pose your questions directly to our wonderful speakers. To ensure that everyone can take part, we'll be taking some questions from the floor and the rest through our online survey tool, Slido. So please have your phones, tablets or laptops to hand. You'll have a chance to vote for other people's questions as well. So even if you don't have a question that you would like to pose yourself, please do go on to Slido and upvote for others. If you're in the room and don't have a mobile device with you, please flag down a member of staff and they'll be able to help you to participate. To get everyone used to the platform, we thought we'd open with a question. So our question this morning is, which communities bring you joy? Which communities bring you joy? Today is all about engineering for communities, and we all belong to a variety of different communities, but what brings you the most joy? For me, though I have many communities that I belong to, reflecting on International Women's Day over the weekend reminded me just how brilliant the community of mums that I've become a part of is since having a baby. People always say that it takes a village, and it really, really does. However, I was very naive, and I thought that the village was going to be to balance the baby and support the baby. It's all for me. The village is to raise me as a mother. And so I think that's a community that I really, really value and brings me joy. Seeing yours coming up on the screen now, let's have a look. Family is the big one, absolutely. There are some brilliant ones on here. There are arts community, being a woman, women in engineering society, excellent dog walking, sisterhood. Oh, some amazing ones up there. Fantastic. I could look at these all day. I'm not going to though. Thank you, everyone. Community is, God, so great ones. No, I'm going to stop. There we go. So community is so powerful, and I'm really excited for us to be able to lean into the excellence of the engineering community today. I think that's probably more than enough for me. So it is my absolute great pleasure to welcome our CEO, Dame Tamara Finkelstein, to the stage to officially start today. Please welcome Tamara.
Thanks so much, Rosa, and to you and the team for putting today together. It's fantastic to see such a full room and to have people joining online as well. And I think there's going to be some incredible outputs from today as well, because this is these are engineers. We're going to get stuff done. So adding to Rosa's welcome to the conference today here at the Royal Academy. I've recently joined the Academy after a long career in the civil service, and throughout my career so far, I have been motivated by seeking to find the solutions to the big problems that face us as society. How do we drive economic growth to raise living standards? How do we tackle climate change? How do we improve health outcomes? And as a policymaker, I drew a number of conclusions. One was that all challenging policy problems are actually systems problems and require collaborative working and a systems mindset to resolve. The second was that it is engineering and technology that has the power to unlock the solutions to these problems in many cases. And third, that without placing equality, diversity and inclusion at the heart of our policy making, our systems thinking and our solutions, we fail to solve these major problems for all of society. And that is a failure we can't tolerate. And that's why we're all here today. And it's also what drew me to the Academy, its staff, fellows, friends and partners, to be part of and help build a community that solve the problems of society that matter. And I noticed that the Academy came up in our word cloud as a community, and it is an extraordinary community. I hope we'll build that further today. We all know that few professions shape daily life so directly or so profoundly as engineering. It determines how we travel, how we communicate, how we heat our homes, how we access healthcare, how safe we are. And it shapes the systems that quietly underpin society in all its diversity. Inclusion, therefore, is not peripheral to engineering excellence, it's fundamental to it. And engineering solutions which work for some and badly for others play into an unequal society. And we know there are plenty of well-evidenced examples of that, from inequality in healthcare to public safety and access to the built environment. I'm sure we'll talk more about some of those today. Throughout my career in public service, I've seen that evidence-based decision-making is only as strong as the range of voices it includes. And when we fail to ask who benefits, who might be excluded, and whose experience is missing, we design systems that work brilliantly for some and poorly for others. During COVID, my department led on food security and supply, and I was struck by the challenges of missing data to help us identify how we could ensure that we were reaching everyone we needed to. One grant that we developed was for hard-to-reach communities, and there was an organisation ideal for doing the outreach, but they needed a bit of money for capacity building to be able to use it effectively. But the way we had devised the grant made it impossible to provide that help and give them the grant. And it was a lesson that thinking through the flexibility you may need from the start is essential to deliver the benefits of true inclusion. It's a lesson for engineers too. Because equity, diversity and inclusion is not simply about fairness, though fairness matters deeply. It is about excellence. Excellence, resilience and public trust. And that's central to our mission as an academy. Last year, the Academy launched our strategy to 2030 with a clear ambition to use our expertise and networks to engineer better lives in the UK and internationally. That ambition is built around 3 goals, all of which depend on a meaningful commitment to diversity. The first is to build a sustainable and innovative economy. We want growth that strengthens infrastructure, supports innovation, and improves lives across the whole of society. We're committed to ensuring that technology improves lives. That means anticipating and avoiding harm, protecting rights, and designing systems that expand opportunity rather than entrenching inequality. And we're building an engineering community fit for the future, a profession that reflects the society it serves, a profession where talented people from every background can thrive. Inclusive environments do not dilute excellence, they enable it. So today's theme, Engineering for Communities, span all 3 of these goals. It reminds us that our UK engineering community, 8.5 million people strong, has both reach and responsibility. And communities are not abstract. They are the patients relying on medical devices, the families living in new housing, the commuters using transport networks, the small businesses adopting new technologies. And communities matter to me, as it does to all of us. I've spent my life building communities in my work by working across teams, departmental and professional boundaries to deliver outcomes. And in my community life as a charity trustee in schools and services for profound learning disabilities, building connections between service providers, recipients and local people to create community. True community delivers better outcomes for all people more effectively and efficiently. And I'm very excited to be deepening my role within the engineering community and learn from all of you what it means to truly engineer for change. And I'm particularly proud to do this at the Academy because through our strategy, the Academy is turning towards greater inclusion at a time when many are turning away. We all know that the world is a complicated one at the moment. Many leaders and institutions are stepping back from equity, diversity and inclusion. Watching years of progress stall or even reverse is troubling, but it also sharpens our resolve. It presents an opportunity and the responsibility to lead differently. Here at the Academy, we've undertaken a governance review to ensure our structures are agile, transparent and grounded in expertise, and we're elevating EDI within our governance structures, embedding meaningful scrutiny at the highest levels and ensuring that inclusion informs every significant decision we make. If engineering is to generate and maintain public trust, inclusion must shape how we define value and how we exercise power. And that trust also depends on ethical practice. Last month, along with the Engineering Council, the Academy launched a new statement of ethical principles. This shared commitment recognises that all aspiring and practicing engineering professionals are part of a community defined by problem solving, integrity, creativity and responsibility. And within the statement is a clear call to inclusion. Engineers have a responsibility to protect people, respect rights and uphold public trust nationally and globally. That includes delivering outcomes that meet diverse needs across society. Across the engineering landscape, organisations are delivering against the UK's Industrial Strategy 2025, which is focused on inclusive, resilient and sustainable growth. And over the next decade, more than £725 billion is planned for social and economic infrastructure, including affordable housing and transport, with £22.6 billion annually committed to research and development by 2029. Society cannot afford to invest at this scale without ensuring that inclusivity is embedded at the core of innovation, in how we design our solutions, the talent we attract, and the teams that we build. This is not only just, it's economically essential. And that's why this event today is so important. Today is both a celebration and a challenge. It's a celebration of the richness and purpose of our engineering community, and a challenge to all of us to scrutinise how we best deliver for the communities who depend on us to get it right. The flow of the day has been designed, as Rosa said, to move from discussion to action. You'll hear from leaders across disciplines about building psychologically and physically safe spaces and embedding inclusion into processes, not leaving it to chance. And this afternoon's workshop time is your opportunity to help shape what comes next, to act. We want to hear what is working, what the gaps are, and how the Academy can support inclusive engineering across products, processes, and services. So as we begin today, I invite you to do 3 things. Reflect. Reflect on the people and communities who depend on your work. Consider the engineering systems you and those around you shape, the assumptions you hold, and the impact your decisions carry. Connect. Connect with colleagues across our engineering community because our strength is in our collective insight. And act. Act to take what you learn today and carry it into the places where decisions are made and innovations take place. Reflect, connect, act. If we do these 3 things as a community, we won't just engineer systems, we will engineer trust, opportunity, and better lives. Thank you. So, to properly get today started, I'm really delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Dame Judith Hackitt. Judith is recognised in the UK and internationally as a leader in engineering, safety and systems thinking. And following the Grenfell Tower fire, she came work with me and led the independent review of building regulations and fire safety, which was a really landmark review, which set out clear and uncompromising recommendations that were taken forward and got ahead of the public inquiry to really start to answer those critical questions. She is a distinguished chemical engineer, a former chair of the Health and Safety Executive, and a past president of the Institute of Chemical Engineers. She is a fellow of this academy and a former trustee and has helped very much to shape our long-term direction. And there are few people better placed to challenge and inspire us as we consider what it truly means to engineer for communities. Over to you. Join me in welcoming Dame Judith Hackitt.
Well, Tamara, thank you for that introduction and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here at this particular event on equity, diversity and inclusion. Some of you may know that I've just come back from travelling, got back yesterday, and I happened to be listening to a conversation in an airport in Costa Rica on Sunday, sitting by 2 gentlemen of a certain age, and one said to the other, "Did you know that it's International Women's Day today?" I thought, well, that's good. And then his friend sitting next to him said, "Really? I wonder when we're going to have a Men's Day." And I thought, oh dear. So we've got work to do. So I thought I'd start in this conversation by saying that although some of you know me and you've heard some of my history, I want to tell you a little bit, first of all, about my own story. So, as you heard, I'm a chemical engineer. I studied chemical engineering in the early 1970s, and I studied at Imperial College. There were 4 girls in my year group of 75, and we, women at Imperial College in the 1970s, were only allowed in the Union Bar on Sunday nights, no other day of the week. So times have changed. There was also a beauty parade of fresher first-year women. All the men got to vote. So as we meet here today to discuss equity, diversity and inclusion, let us first reflect on the enormous amount of progress that we have made and which I have seen during the course of my career. Because some of the things I've just said, I am sure, are shocking to some of you in this room, but that's how it was. And some of us have been part of that journey and have played our part in fighting some of those battles to get us to where we are now. And things are much, much better than they were. After that, and after I graduated, I worked in the chemical industry for almost 25 years before moving on into working in the third sector, in trade bodies, and then ultimately into the world of health and safety. And as you've heard, I chaired the UK Health and Safety Executive for about 10 years. And then in 2017, I was asked to do the review of building regulations and fire safety for the government after the Grenfell Tower tragedy. Throughout all of my career, knowing how to behave and how to be heard has been a challenge and continues to be. And I can honestly say that in the early days of my career, I didn't always get it right. When I started out as a young engineer, very much in the minority, the first woman ever to work in the refinery where I worked, I tried to fit in by being like the men I worked with. That was not being true to myself. And a major change for me came when I went on a women's leadership program, a program that helped me to recognize my strengths, my contributions, and how to make myself heard. That was when I realized that my innate ability to think and see the world differently was an asset, not a weakness. It gave me the confidence to see the value I could bring to the roles I had and to any conversation because of the diversity of my thinking and the way I saw the world was different from the way other people did. But I still had to learn how to get myself heard in a room full of group thinkers. And that continues to be a challenge even today. Please don't think it goes away with seniority. It doesn't. It's still a challenge even now. As a non-exec on a board, it can still be challenging to speak up and express a different view, especially one that others really, really don't want to hear. You will also note from my brief career history that the last 20 years or so have really been very deeply involved in health and safety. It is my personal passion. I believe very strongly that this lies at the heart of what we do as engineers. We have a moral and an ethical responsibility to provide solutions that provide benefit to society. But in doing that, we should not ever create harm or risk of harm to people or the environment. That has to be the deal, that our solutions do not put people or the environment at risk. And there's a strong link here, I believe, to being heard. Because psychological safety is about creating an environment in which, in every workplace, where everyone feels included, feels that their views are valued, and that they are listened to, and most importantly, that it is safe to speak up and say what they think, or to ask the difficult questions. One of the most shocking parts of my review of building safety after Grenfell was to realize the extent to which people didn't speak up about things they knew were wrong, or for some, including the residents at the time, when they did express concerns, no one listened and their views were ignored. For us as engineers, diversity and inclusion also has to be beyond simply talking about that among ourselves. It's not enough for us to sit in a room like this and recognize that we must be inclusive in our thinking. It means engaging with other people from other non-scientific and non-engineering disciplines. It is essential if we are to deliver solutions that meet the needs of society. We must never be trapped in thinking that we know best and we can design solutions for them. When you build a railway like HS2, and I was on the board of HS2 for 7 years, it's not enough to say that we will make the railway accessible to everyone. You have to design it to be accessible, and you do that by talking to and engaging with people with hearing and sight and physical impairments to tell you what it feels like to travel, what the challenges are for them when they try to access means of transport. You listen to what they say and you take their views and their fears and their concerns into that design process, because only when you listen to what they have to say will you get it right. I am so pleased to have this opportunity to be at this conference today and to share some of my experiences, not only in this speech, but also as part of the panel. I've learned a lot over my career and I've seen huge progress, but we must keep at this and we must all keep at this. I still know that I do not know everything about diversity and inclusion and never will. We all have to learn from one another. I very much share the view that Tamara expressed earlier, that diversity and inclusion are not nice to do's by any means, and we should not be pressurized by others into keeping quiet about a subject that matters so much. It is fundamental to the better solutions that we need to provide and to successful business. The issues we face today in ensuring that everyone is included continue to change, and your experience today from all walks in this room will be very different from mine from 40 or 30 years ago, or even the way I perceive the world today. We need to talk, we need to listen to each other, and we need to continue to learn. My personal belief and my personal wish is that we get to a point where every day is not Women's Day or Men's Day, but every day is Inclusion of Everyone Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dame Judith, for that really insightful keynote. Thank you. I think there is so much that, oh, sorry, you're just speaking to the microphone. There is so much that we try to look at within equity, diversity and inclusion. And I think kind of where it's great to be able to see where we've been and also where we can go in the future. The good news is that we're about to explore the topic even further. Our next session is titled Safe to Speak, Turning Voice into Value. And the focus here is not on why psychological safety matters, but how organizations can actively create the conditions where voices are appreciated and genuinely influence outcomes. I'm delighted that Dame Judith will be continuing the conversation with us, and the session will be chaired by Fellow of the Academy, Rachel Skinner-Skibbe. Please, Rachel, I'll hand over to you, and please join us in welcoming the panel.
Right. I feel like I'm juggling a lot of kit here. I've got iPads, I've got books, never mind. Right, let's put that one down somewhere for a minute. Good morning, everybody. Gosh, it is a room full. I couldn't see the back from around here. Thank you very much, first of all, Judith. You've stolen half of what I was going to say, obviously, and before that, Tamara as well. But there we go. These things happen. Absolutely brilliant, I think, to have convened this panel today. And I hope, exactly as Rose has just said, that we're now going to dig into a bit more of not the sort of, the fact that it's important, but, how do we actually get this a bit more right, I suppose. So I know some of you just looking out across the room, but not everybody. So I'm Rachel Skinner. I'm the managing director at WSP for our transport and mobility business in the UK and Ireland. I became an Academy Fellow in 2019. I chair the External Affairs Committee at the moment, have done since, I think, 2022. And I was ICE president during COVID. So I got the 2020 to 21 window and talked a lot about climate action, which I will come back to in a minute, actually, as one of my own personal moments of being a bit brave and saying something that others weren't saying, if that makes sense. So I think you've heard probably 2-3 times already over the course of the morning. Really, I guess our kind of clarion call really is that this psychological safety topic is not something that's nice to have. It's completely fundamental to the way we do all of the different things that all of us in this room, sort of take things forward and try to make good change and so on. I guess if I had to put it into my own words and just maybe to express it slightly differently, to me, I think this psychological safety topic wraps around the whole of the kind of the engineering envelope. So we're kind of a backstop in terms of spotting risk and acting to do something about it, in terms of saying there's something that's not right, there's something we need to change, there's something we've seen now that we didn't see before. So it's kind of as I say, the backstop of it, but it's also the key in terms of the kind of the forward movement, the innovation, the pull in terms of how do we get things so much better as we come up with better solutions constantly. And I would really like, I hope, through this conversation, to get to kind of both ends of that a little bit and have examples that come through in terms of both sides, the sort of the negative and the positive, I guess. So we're going to try and dig into this practical piece around what does this really mean in the real world, inside engineering teams and organisations, institutions, and how we connect together this piece around physical safety and risk management and better outcomes for society, which of course is exactly what we're all here to do. It would be remiss of me not to pick up on the International Women's Day point right at the beginning as well. Obviously, we all know Sunday just gone. The 8th of March is always International Women's Day, and obviously, and we've heard a little echo of this already, but I think just to unpack it one more layer, and I think Susan, you're bound to come to this very shortly as well. Obviously, our community of engineers needs to represent the communities out there in the world. And we also know that we have a major problem in terms of that point. It doesn't matter whether we're thinking about gender or whether we're thinking about ethnicity or whether we're thinking about age or whether we're thinking about any of the different characteristics that subdivide all of us into individual people. We have a major problem because right now the community of engineers does not represent society out there, whether you're thinking about the UK or the world at large. And I think that is something we need to be really, really mindful of as we go forward. Exactly as you were just saying, I suppose, Judith, we will not, no one person can possibly know all the answers or be right all the time, but it is that diversity of opinions and viewpoints that makes all the difference. So I'm hoping also we might come into some of those sort of things as we go along. So at this point, I feel I should probably introduce the panel. Really, you've all seen Judith already. So thank you very much, Judith, for sticking with us. But if I just work my way briefly down the line here, just so you know who else you're about to hear from, we have Dr. Rahim Mohammadi, who's innovation leader at Medtronic. I will get them all to introduce themselves properly in just a moment, in just a couple of minutes. We then have Susan Robson, who's CEO of the Women's Engineering Society. I shall say I'm a patron. Excellent. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
It's all good. It's all good. And then on the far end, we have Chris Taylor, who is Head of Safety and Assurance Delivery at the Air Navigation Service provider, NATS. So lots of different perspectives here, lots of different types of engineering that we're about to hear about. And I suppose really what we're trying to get at here is overall, how have we seen psychological safety create value across the different sort of realms, remits of our lives, organisations, institutions, etc., that we've been involved with. So we're going to look at that in a variety of different ways. So first of all, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. What I thought we might do, we've obviously already heard, Judith, from you in terms of a little bit about your background, but perhaps if we just quickly work our way down the panel, and just in a minute or two each perhaps, just give us a very brief snapshot of your experience and just reflect briefly on what you've heard so far, and maybe if there's a personal experience that jumps to mind that you just want to make sure people in the room and online are aware of, that would be fantastic in terms of just getting us kind of centered into the conversation. So I guess, Rahim, if we could start with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Rahim Mohammadi from Medtronic. I'm an innovation leader, and Medtronic is basically a medical device company where just we span over across different specialty, which is to see the scale of the devices we have. Basically, in every second, 2 patients treated by one of our devices across the world. And it's a big company, but my responsibility there is to mainly focus on innovations in the field of laparoscopic surgery. For those who don't know, it's basically the keyhole surgery. When you perform a surgical procedure through a couple of keys in the abdomen. And this is where I'm basically spending my time thinking about understanding really where are the unmet needs, that's where we need to really hear from different perspectives, understand what are the needs from different specialty, from different stakeholders in the care delivery systems, and thinking about, okay, what are the risks, how we can actually take in those voices, translate them into let's say technologies and solutions that can be helping those teams along the care delivery pathways. And if we think of this, I think there is a lot of unfortunate instances that I think we can later on unpack as well. But there have been recall of products, as probably you may have seen some of those in the field, and that exactly shows that where engineering decisions can actually lead to high stake in the field, especially in my field, working with patients, that's where you need to actually have extra due diligence and checks along the way as you're developing your product to make sure that you are considering as best as possible all the aspects, taking in all the voices, and that we're having a team that can contribute. That's where you can actually get values, because as we know, the productivity does not come from an individual, it comes from basically collective intelligence that can lead to significant impacts on what we are delivering.
Sure.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. That's helpful. Susan,
Hello.
let's see if your microphone's working first of all.
Is it working?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Hello, I'm Susan, and thank you to the Academy for inviting me along today. So I'm here because I work for an organisation that really cares that the public know that this is what an engineer can look like. And I say this is what an engineer can look like. The words "can look like" are doing some heavy lifting there, because I'm not actually an engineer, but I could be. So we've been around for a long time, and we work across communities to really make sure that women are entering engineering, and then once they're there, they can stay, have fulfilling careers. And over the years, we've kind of expanded that into working with organisations to make sure they can access the best engineers, which of course includes that hard to reach talent pool of women. And then the third thing that we kind of do at the Women's Engineering Society is really engage with government, other third sector organisations to influence policy, regulation, legislation around things that matter and affect women in engineering. You asked us to reflect on some personal things that came up.
That jumps to mind. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we got the topic around psychological safety, I kind of deconstructed it into a couple of things, both of which Dame Judith and Dame Tamara have picked up on already. So that piece around the fear of speaking up, and I think for me, not just for women, I mean, obviously for women, there is that fear when you know you're probably going to be labelled a difficult woman or angry Black woman, that you might be a bit reluctant to speak up. But you hear it all the time in organisations where people are about to say something and a colleague will say, oh, that's a bit of a career limiting move. And for me, that's a red flag, because if you're saying that to someone you're already in an organization where your career is limited. So that was one thing. The other thing was around, again, that Dame Tamara and Dame Judith mentioned, was around that groupthink and the moral disengagement that happens. And we've seen a very real example of that in our recent apprentice voice survey, where we surveyed our apprentices. And our apprentices said that they very much felt safe at work. Great stuff. 2 sections down, are you getting access to the right PPE? No. So the women are sort of morally disengaging and say, yes, I feel safe, but the evidence is telling us that they're not actually being kept safe. So yeah, there are my 2 pieces.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Chris.
Hi, is my microphone working?
I think it is.
Hi, I'm Chris Taylor. I recognise some of the faces in there. Recently graduated from the Inclusive Leadership Programme that was run by the Academy. I'm very proud to be sitting here, having got through that. It's a very profound learning that myself and colleagues from NATS have brought back into the company. So I'll just talk briefly on that. But what is NATS? NATS is an air navigation service provider, which probably doesn't mean a lot to most people here, but you've probably heard of air traffic control, and you've probably all been on flights or received service from our company. So my role in the company is I'm the head of safety and assurance delivery. Anything that's coming from our engineering disciplines, whether it be software changes, system architecture changes, airspace changes, R&D, will come through my team, and we assess it for its safety, see if we're introducing any risks and how we can mitigate any risks, and making sure that it's fit for purpose before the travelling public get to experience that service. So coming on the journey through the Inclusive Leadership Programme for me was quite, quite profound learning. It was really quite eye-opening, some of the different thoughts and opinions that came out that I hadn't considered myself. I think I went into it thinking I know what ED&I was about, but actually realising I was quite naive. And there's actually a bit more beneath the veneer of ED&I, and if you get really deep into it, there's a lot to be sort of gleaned from that. So we've taken that back into the company, and we delivered our own inclusive leadership training as a pilot for about 40 of the leadership in the company, and we're now just about to embark on rolling that wider into the organisation for all leadership. But I think the key learning for me is actually it isn't just about leadership. This is, we can all be leaders in ED&I, no matter what level you sit at in your own organizations, whatever hierarchical positions you have. We've all got an opportunity to stand up for what's right and do something about it. And that's really the key thing for me. And you need that psychological safety to give yourself that platform and to give others the platform to stand up and be those role models.
Thank you. That's a fantastic story. It's funny, actually. I can't resist just picking up on Susan's point just now, but also, Chris, on something you just said. In the context of the wider engineering world at large and so on, I've discovered that I'm that climate woman, which can either be said as that climate woman or that climate woman, and it means very different things depending on who's actually saying the words, that kind of thing. So yes, I mean you're reminding me very much of, I guess I alluded to it a few minutes ago, my own kind of choice, which must have now been 7-8 years ago, in terms of knowing I needed to pick on a theme for my ICE year as president, not knowing at the time that COVID was coming towards us and so on. It was really interesting that so many people actually assumed that I was going to pick diversity as my theme. And I was thinking, well, no, the one thing I'm definitely not going to pick is diversity, because I'm going to just do the diversity bit by bringing something different. And so then when I sort of landed on the climate action thing, and then obviously that was pretty controversial. Obviously, we all knew about climate change then, but the engineering community, certainly the civil engineering community, I think it's fair to say, wasn't quite ready to take proper action on that. And it was a bit of a stunning shock to some of them in terms of saying, oh, I've actually got a job to do now. So I think I'm still that climate woman, but it is interesting to see how that's kind of evolved over time. I think it's a compliment really for most of them, but maybe not everybody, but there we go. So, okay, so we've got a few questions that I'm now going to pose to our panellists. But I want to just remind people, as you've already heard, that there is a Slido set of questions running as well. I can see we've got a couple of questions, one of them for somebody I know. I can't see if she's here or not. There we go. If you want to ask questions either online or in the room via Slido, that's fine. I think we will also have the opportunity, assuming we have another microphone, to ask questions out loud in the room when we get to that section as well. So if everybody can be thinking about what they might like to ask and either put it through online now, that would be great, or be ready to ask when we get to that section. Judith, I'm going to come to you first, if that's all right, on this one. I guess just sort of unpacking this a little bit and thinking really about learning in particular. Is there an example, perhaps there's perhaps an obvious one out of Grenfell, but where you've seen an approach where people have responded to failure in an engineering context, but in a way that's actually genuinely helped to strengthen trust instead of making things worse? Is there a sort of an anecdote? Is there a moment that jumps to mind where that's something that you might want to share today? Yeah, I guess. Although I would say that I have found the community who I feel should have felt more responsible for Grenfell have been really, really reluctant to change. If I compare that with other communities that I've been part of or been near to, so for example, in my own sector of chemicals, you know, when things like Piper Alpha happened or Flixborough, if you go back that far, there was very much a sense within that community of chemical engineers at the time that said, we've got this horribly wrong and we need to do it differently and we need to learn and we need to listen to one another more and listen to those voices who express concerns, and all of that really happened. What I found with the Grenfell community is not, and by that I don't mean the people at Grenfell, but I mean the people who design and create the built environment. There is still a sense of it wasn't my fault. It was them, not me. And whoever them is, they dissociate from it. So the hard part for me has been getting that culture change around getting an industry that's really quite siloed to work as a community. And it's taken a really long time and a lot of effort to get that sense of collaboration and sharing of knowledge to start to embed itself. Because it isn't all about regulation. You know, we fixed the regulation and put that in place. That was the easy bit. But getting people to think and act differently, that's the key. Oh, fantastic. Raheem, do you want to come in on the same sort of points? Yeah, thank you. With
See if the mic works, yeah. So I think like one example that probably will come to my mind now is from the early days that we were designing some products. And as we were like deep in the weeds of designing, like, so, okay, what we want to build, how we want to make it work slicker, more towards the question that we have in point, we forgot about actually a important pieces, which was, okay, when this is used in the environment, which is in this case, it was using a device in an operating room to listen to all the stakeholders in the room, not only one. And as you would imagine, in our field, the surgeons have a very high voice, important in terms of what you want to design. And when you create those devices, it's true that you want to impact probably mainly through a surgeon, but this is not often only them that are important in that environment and what you do. And just to give you a little bit more detail here, was we were designing a system that, forget about basically the software delivery of that solution, but it requires a device. And that device will not be sitting next to the surgeon. Instead, it'll be somewhere next to the scrub nurse or the running nurse as you see them in the operating room. It's true that the engineer had this all day long on their desk, but they have never actually paid attention to the amount of noise that it makes, probably because we are blind to that and we think, okay, yeah, those devices always are so noisy and we are comfortable working around them. But when you put this into operating room, actually it can create a hazard. And that's where when we are, luckily we were in the early R&D, but when we took those devices actually and tested in the OR, like straight away we realized, okay, yeah, this is where we actually get when we get the feedback from the surgeon, assistant, all of them, they were super happy, everything. But then suddenly we see, okay, there is a resistance and pushback from the nurses. And the reason being that, okay, this is a very loud device. It's not easy for us to work around.
Yeah.
And that's where actually including like the voices of different, let's say, stakeholders and trying to incorporate this early on in your design is important. And I don't know, like if the people here are familiar, but this is where actually we are trying to heavily rely on Six Sigma methodologies. That's basically a way that we are trying to now embed this more and more into our product design so that those steps are basically not missed along the way.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, thank you. And I think actually some of what both of you are saying there actually leads on very neatly to, in fact, is one of the questions that a lot of people have picked up on already on the Sido, but is something that we were planning to dig into in any case. If I try to kind of paraphrase it all together, we're talking a lot here about the way that decisions are made and leadership, essentially. And the question, I suppose, really becomes, is it actually all about leadership? Is it about people in formal positions of power or informally taking on those roles and so on? Is it about the people, or is it actually about wrapping processes and practices and good ways of working into, the way that those teams actually come together? Is there a way of separating that out, or is it really a case that we need both? And I guess at that point, chicken, egg kind of springs to mind in terms of thinking this through. I wonder, Chris, if we might come to you first on that one.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of everything. I think, process and policy and so on, that's kind of systemic. So if you've not got ED&I built into that, then you've got a problem. But actually, I think in order to make a change, to make a difference, you need to focus on people, because people create the process, the policy and so on. So the people are the people that are going to drive that. And I think encouraging that psychological safety is absolutely paramount, and trying to get people to speak up about that. And I think it's not something, psychological safety can be perceived as being perhaps woke or being soft. It's absolutely not. It's really hard as a leader to actually promote that, because you want to sell your idea. You want positive feedback. We all like to be told we're doing a good job and doing the right thing. But actually, psychological safety might be pitching an idea and saying, actually, I need all the negative thoughts on this. I need some help with this. I can't do this on my own. I need the voices in the room. I need everybody's input, because I'm going to walk out that door with this idea. And if you're telling me it's good, I'm going to trip up, and I want to know that. So it's about trying to create that environment, that safe space where you're encouraging people to come forward with these things. Now, there's a fear sometimes, I think, of actually you're going to open a real can of worms here, and you're just going to get a barrage of negative feedback. At the end of the day, as a leader, you're still in charge in terms of making the decisions. And it's about recognizing that and seeing if you're getting that feedback that you don't quite agree with. You still want to hear it. You still want to know about it. But it's your decision, and it's about telling people in the room or the individuals that you've taken on board their thoughts, but you've got other considerations, and actually, my decision's this. But giving that rationale and explanation is equally as important as agreeing with people when you don't.
So, Susan, from what Chris is saying there, I mean, a lot of that seems to rely on individual people in leadership roles behaving in the way that you're describing. Does it require, in your view, that sort of formal power to be, sort of invested in a person to allow them to behave like this? Or do we see, and again, picking up on one of the questions that's coming through on the Slido, is there an opportunity here for kind of grassroots action at a more junior level throughout layers of our industries and the various different parts of engineering?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's loads of layers. And I think looking for insights, which is what Chris was talking about there, insights from diverse perspectives is key here. Dame Tamara talked about engineering, designing solutions for economic success, and also, more importantly, societal success. And I think if we're going to do that and do it well and create this situation of psychological safety that if we don't have ends up in catastrophic disaster, then we need to look into several stakeholder groups, and I'll go through those now. Apologies, I've written notes because I've got a memory, and also I pick up on what other people say. So I think the first one is obviously looking to the people who are doing the design, so the engineers. And I guess the issue here we have is, where are the women engineers? So I do know a few. So if you're looking for some, come to us. But again, it's around designing designing in inclusive ways, and you can only do that if you've got a diverse set of engineers on your team. But also looking at those people that support the engineers. So we're quite careful to talk about women in engineering, because there's lots of shoulders that engineers are standing on that make your business work. And again, you want those diverse voices. I think as a non-engineer, Tamara immediately started talking about things in terms of systems engineering, and went very deep into some engineering language there. You do need people who can bring you out of the engineering language so that you can talk to all people about the engineering. You know, we talked about leaders there. You do want diverse leaders, because they will ultimately set those the operating model for your organization. And by operating model, people who've spoken to me know I'll say operating model about 400 times when I answer a question. But it is about setting those guardrails for how you work in your business. So it's the governance, it's the how you measure performance, the systems you use, and all of those elements create the culture that you set. So that when your leaders are not in the room, everyone knows what the guardrails are. And then for your business, you know, you want to speak to a diverse set of customers, people who are not yet customers, and that means reaching out beyond maybe, you know, your you know, one type of person. And then the fifth group, I guess, is the most important for those designs which impact society. And I can't remember if it was Dame Tamara or Dame Judith who said this, but you know, for those existential problems like climate change, like infrastructural resilience, we'll either solve this for everyone or we'll solve it for no one. And if we're not listening to the voice of all the impacting people, we are not going to come up with the right solutions that solve them. So that's my kind of 5 stakeholder groups.
No, absolutely. I think that's really helpful. And in fact, you've given me a beautiful segue into the most liked question on Slido so far. I appreciate you guys can't see it, but this is almost like you're psychic.
Do I win a prize? But
Sadly not. Although I think there are some good toys on the table, but there we go. There's a comment that's come in terms of the Slido that leads into a question. And again, I think it sort of picks up on exactly what you were just getting at towards the end there. I will actually just read some of this out because I think the wording is quite powerful. Misogyny amongst young men and boys is getting more overt, with almost half, I guess it depends on where you look, agreeing with people like Andrew Tate's views. I have teenagers myself. We've had some of these conversations in our house. The view, though, for today, and to take that forward, is to be thinking around how might that, as a kind of a movement, as a groundswell and so on, how might that actually go forward in terms of impacting on inclusion in what's already often male-dominated sectors? Could we actually end up with something that gets worse in terms of trying to reach out across communities and making sure that a genuinely diverse range of voices are genuinely heard? Or are we potentially, seeing the beginning of something that might actually make things or send things in the wrong direction? Judith, you're nodding away as I'm reading as I'm going to that question. Do you want to come in first on that one? Yeah, I do. I think it's a really serious issue and a really serious concern. And if you go back to my somewhat flippant comment about this conversation I overheard in the airport on Sunday, one way of interpreting I wonder when we're going to have a men's day is the kind of uninformed, perhaps misogynistic view of, what about us? But there's a serious point to it, I think, which is exactly that. Is the way in which we have approached diversity and creating all of these different special interest groups in the past, has there been an unintended consequence of that, in as much as we have created another group who feel excluded? And that's why, for me, the key word in this conference today is about inclusivity. It doesn't matter who you are, you need to feel included. And I think some of the ways that we've gone about recognizing diversity in the past has been to create a number of different silos. And we've forgotten to include one group, white males. So there's now quite a lot of white males out there who feel like nobody cares about them. And that has resulted in the Andrew Tate thing. And that's really, really troubling. And it tells us we've got to rethink this, and we've got to create an environment where everybody feels heard, whoever they are and wherever they are.
Absolutely. Chris, did you want to come in briefly on that one as well?
Yeah, I can.
Be the body language and sense you might have something to say.
For me, it's simply about creating balance. That's what inclusivity is about. It's about making sure everybody's got a voice. All the quiet people in the room can have a voice. And in actual fact, I'm using the word voice, but it's not necessarily about voice. There are other ways of interactions, and we need to consider that and think about that. Perhaps people aren't comfortable to put their hand up and speak loud in a group of people. There's other means of doing that. We've got the questions coming through on here. So I think we've got to consider that as well, and that's another element of inclusivity as well. There might be people who have got some incapacity of being able to interact in the same way that most people can. So I think it's about making sure you absolutely advocate bringing people forward from minority groups. Asking them to go first to talk, encouraging that and giving them credit for doing so as well in front of others. Just making that safe space for people to speak out.
Sure.
Can I do 2 minutes?
Go on, and then we're going to come out to the room. I'm going to apologise also because we've got so many questions.
So
online.
don't worry that.
No, you can go on
I
briefly,
just
and then we're
wanted
going to come
to
out.
say, I think, it is troubling that the Overton window is being moved further to the right, and that people are feeling it's okay. I think the point around inclusivity, the sort of silver lining of this, is it's taken, I'm going to say, thousands of years for us to form these groups where underrepresented people come together as a network to try and improve something for themselves. And I think that's been the joining factor across them, that people are trying to do something to improve their situation. The silver lining is that perhaps white men now are feeling a bit vulnerable, of course, because when you're challenging systems where they have had access to privileged positions, of course, they're going to be reluctant, consciously or unconsciously, to change. But I think the positive is that when they have now felt marginalised, it's taken 5 minutes for them to feel heard, because now we've got these movements. So I think we can drown out the Andrew Tates with raising up those good men that are there, and there are many of them out there. So I would always advocate for people to do that. But yeah, silver linings, but yeah, troubling.
Absolutely. I think I'm encouraged also to see, certainly from a DFT point of view, I understand that there is work underway at the moment, not yet out, but to do with inclusive design thinking and trying to recognizing exactly the issue that we're starting to unpack here, and the fact that it has different dimensions depending on who you are, and that the way we have been doing things in terms of whether it's sort of places or transport networks and systems, that actually we need to do a lot better for all of the above reasons and for all of the groups, isn't it? Because otherwise you make it worse in a different way. So, right. I'm going to be brave and see how many people in the room actually do have a question. I'm sort of hoping there might be a match up between the dozens of questions online and some of you who might like to ask questions out loud. Can I just get an indication of roughly how many questions there are in the room at the moment? Okay, right. I can see 3 hands. You're all in a line there, very neat and tidy. Can we take all 3 at once? Oh, I've got extra time suddenly. Hang on a minute. Okay. All right, fine. I've got a little longer than I thought, but no, let's take all 3 and then let's try and pay attention, all of us, and then we'll do our best to get across those. Then we'll come back to some of the questions that are on the slido. Yes, Harvey.
Thank you very much. Elfriede Daramerk from the University of Liverpool. I'm not having a question, but I'm really grateful for this discussion this morning. And I want to point out that we are having the discussion about values. So value of the human aspect in our life. So I'm working in the engineering part, and usually the natural scientists are going about these technical details and what is important back and forth and calculating the numbers and my question is, whom does it benefit? Whom do you talking to? And I think we need to consider that valuing humans as such, whatever we do, is one of the core aspects when we talk about psychological safety. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Exactly right. And I think there were, yes, that's right. Two more. I think across the line there. Thank you.
Aidan Works from Rolls-Royce SMR. So I think the thing I think about with psychological safety is that that's a culture that you create in an organization, and it's maybe a reflection I had from some of the comments from the panel, focusing on the behaviors of leaders in an organization. But I don't think culture is something that is created necessarily or imposed by leaders, but is something that comes from everyone as individuals. And when we've been having discussions internally about creating that culture of psychological safety, my reflection is that it's something that individuals need to take personal responsibility for creating that culture, whether you're a leader or not, because you need to be able to take on board challenge and create that situation where others feel comfortable to do that. So I guess maybe a question, has anyone got any experience of how to encourage that rather than just focusing on leaders in the organization?
No, I think that's a great question. Thank you very much. Can we just yes, take one more question behind you?
Hi, Aisha Akram, University of Manchester. I think it was a question on the Slido as well, so you can.
Great.
It's one of the higher rated.
Try and match it up.
It's about like students and also early career colleagues trying to feel comfortable in raising concerns around inclusion, but facing the backlash of the argument of academic freedom and freedom of speech, and how you would navigate that so people feel more comfortable to speak up.
Yes, I'm glad actually that I spotted that one in the list here. I was thinking we need to get to that one. So thank you very much for asking that one out loud. Right, so we've got a couple of questions there. One to do with culture and sort of how that actually really comes about, and then that second one in terms of, I guess, the early careers environment, the students and so on, and this sort of some mismatch potentially in terms of people finding their voice and what does that mean and so on. Rahim, can we come to you first on your choice of those two?
So I think when you're right, when we think about culture, this is not something that you can create it only by processes or embedding this, but I do think that processes are important in terms of you actually creating a fertilized environment for these behaviors to grow and become embedded in the system. So if you think about this, if you leave basically dealing with failures and problems to the courage of the peoples, that will be in a limited space, again, will probably subject to failure. And I think in this sense, to create those, we do need leaders that are showing vulnerability. They are trying to own the environment as an inclusive environment everyone can speak into, creating a space that all voices are heard. And this is where I think transparency is really important. As to create such environment, I think we do need to think about, okay, as we are going into, especially this is important in difficult situations where you have things that maybe you are either stressed by time, by resources, that's where you need to actually pay more attention to those nuances. And that's where I think seeing transparency, seeing people really reflecting on what they have heard, what they want to go and action upon, has led to, let's say, hearing more and more voices from all the individuals in the team. And one thing we were also talking about before this coming here to the panel, that were like, we are actually, another way that we have now starting to experiment in our team actually to make people, to maybe encourage them to come up and speak more, is like this methodology that talks about basically putting on different hats.
Yeah.
And this is basically It's a way basically to encourage people to feel free about like expressing your feeling, expressing negative feeling, expressing only facts. This is called six-sat thinking, which is, I found it actually quite useful. We have just started actually exploring it, but it's this ways that we are actually trying to explore and encourage this culture of safety and bringing people up so they can actually challenge every assumptions, think about like any stone that has not been unturned, and try to basically get and include all of these voices.
Sure. No, thank you. It's often said, isn't it, in terms of the cultural side of things, I guess a couple of things jump to my mind. It's either the way we do things around here, which is the build-up of, everybody's different behaviours, but it's also the lowest standard of behaviour that you choose to walk past, in terms of that leadership piece. And, if you've somehow tacitly endorsed it, it is part of your culture. So I think your point around, actively kind of consciously putting yourself in different positions is a really useful one in this context. Would anybody like to take on? Oh, Judith, go on. Yep.
I do, because I think for me the answer to a lot of this lies in how you deal with it. And your point about walking past unsafe situations, we've always talked about. You never do that, because then you've set the standard, and people will observe that and say, okay, they don't really care after all. I think the same is true in this space around diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
You will see those behaviours going on all of the time. And whilst it's very good that we now have systems in place and regulation and all of that for the worst of behaviours, there needs to be, for the culture to be right, there needs to be, I think, a level of conversation going on all the time. When people say things without thinking, and it is often without thinking, people need to be able to say, that's not okay. You can't say that. You cannot speak to people like that anymore, or you've just overridden what that person had an important point to make, and you've not allowed them to make. That's what allyship is all about. There is a real role, I think, for people other than the leaders, the senior people. There is a role for us all to be ready to stand up and speak up for people who have been dismissed, ignored, not listened to, and say, did you not hear what they said? Because it's really important. And can we just go back and pick that point up again, because you just trod all over it, and that's not right. And we can all do that all of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And acknowledging it as that prior speaker's idea and not taking it as your own idea, which I think we've also all seen happen from time to time. But there we go. No, absolutely, exactly right. What about the question to do with the sort of the earlier careers piece, the student voice versus the the sort of academic voice, that kind of thing? Anybody want to come in on that one at all, in terms of how that's sort of playing out in real time? We're encouraging these youngsters to find their voice, and yet sometimes that is in itself, making life a challenge. Chris, Susan?
Yeah,
Susan.
I can come in on that. And I think it can build on the question from Rolls-Royce SMR there around giving people permission to speak up, but noting that they're not in positions of power, and that's very difficult. And also noting that the people who are more likely to have issues that they need to speak up about are the people for whom the systems have not been built. So there's an unequal load on minorities, basically. I've had this before where people are like, oh, well done, keep speaking up for women. And I almost want to go, do you know what? I'm really tired. It would be great if someone else could speak up on our behalf. And I think it's that allyship piece, raising up those, those good men who are very much there and should be more visible. So it's a difficult one. And I think, the question for anyone who notices someone having difficulty speaking up, and I would ask you to look for it as part of your everyday inclusion behaviour, is that important phrase that I think John Amici put it in a really good way, which is, what I tolerate, I'm responsible for. And I think that's quite damning, to say that if you don't speak up for others, you're tolerating something that you should then be, as a leader, as a middle manager, accountable for.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to come next to.
Can I just
Oh,
add
go on, Judith.
one thing,
Go on.
Rachel?
Yes.
Because I think some of the best organisations I've seen in this space around giving voice to younger people in their organisation, the whole idea of reverse mentorship is so powerful. When leaders in the organisation recognise, as I said, we don't know everything. In fact, there's an awful lot we don't know, and especially about the way the next generations perceive the world and what their concerns are and so on. So for me, that whole principle of reverse mentorship is so important for organizations to actually formally create that space for the leaders to recognize that they need to learn
Yes.
from those younger people in their organization and to see that as a two-way process, not all top down.
No, absolutely.
And can I just come in with a really quick point there?
Those are good
So
questions. Thank you.
I think if, again, with our eye on the way society is going, it's a real red flag for me where lots of organizations are doing the quick AI sweep where they're getting rid of these early career roles. And so you cannot have the reverse mentoring because you don't have the entry level jobs, or you don't have as many of those entry level jobs. So it's just something to understand the value that those the younger generation are bringing, and if we're excluding them because it's cheaper, then we need to hold ourselves to account for that.
No, I think that is right. Susan is on fire today. This iPad's just turned itself off, and I have absolutely no idea how to set that on again. Anyway, Susan's on fire today because there's also a question to do with AI that was coming through from the Sido as well, actually.
Definitely need a prize.
Clearly, double prizes now for Susan. But I think from a slightly different perspective, actually, in terms of the way in which, not so much to do with the roles in engineering. I don't know if it's the battery's gone or whatever, but anyway, there we are. Not so much to do with the roles in engineering, because actually I think I've got slightly more a positive outlook on that, actually. I think because I know we all hear the sort of the doom and gloom side of things, but actually I think we're also seeing that people are then sort of stopping and thinking about that and saying, no, hang on a minute, we do in fact need people to think about this, do the critical thinking to actually make sense of what the AI might be telling us and make sure it vaguely matches with what common sense would otherwise say. No, I promise I haven't broken it. It wasn't me. Anyway, no, the question on the system from memory was to do with a slightly different perspective on AI and the fact that obviously its use across all types of engineering and indeed, across pretty much all sectors across the world now, really, in terms of the way that work is produced and so on, actually in itself could have implications in terms of this argument. And so whether it's to do with an individual person putting forward something that's made use of AI and how we acknowledge that, how we credit that, is it really what you think or is it actually what the AI tells you to think? I think it takes us into another sort of dimension in terms of the psychology behind all of this. I wonder if that sort of sparks off any thoughts. Chris, can I come to you first on that one?
Yeah, so I think with AI, it's the checks and balances to make sure that it's ethical AI is really important. In NATS, we're doing some studies, and I don't want to alarm anybody here, by the way, but we're doing some studies and say, well, could AI do air traffic control? That doesn't mean we're going to replace our controllers overnight. This is certainly a long-term study, and it's very early in its sort of maturity, but that journey of going there, it's like if you want to fly to the moon, you have to think about flying to Mars. It's that kind of thinking. There's certainly scope there for AI to do some of the less critical thinking, the less executive commands, and be a support to our controllers. And with that has to come a level of trust, because controllers, when they work with each other, they recognize the person that they're working with. They know how credible they are. They can see if they're getting nervous or anxious about something. You can't tell that with AI. That's a real concern for a controller who might be using that. And I think we really need to understand the makeup of that AI. We need to understand that it's doing the right thing. We need to know that the ethical thinking is embedded within how it's designed, how it works. Because we expose ourselves by the decisions it makes. So there have been examples of that.
Absolutely. Raheem, any thoughts on that one?
I mean, just a quick thing on AI. If I think about it, I think one important piece that I would like to stress here is when we work with AIs in all fronts. Like it's to make sure that we are actually not combining this with feelings. That's what I oftentimes see, that, okay, like AI is a tool, like every other tool that we have. It can do some job fantastically, but the thing is we should not be actually mixing this with feelings. And that's also true that now it's coming more and more to more dimensions of our life. So we should be extra careful in terms of, okay, how much we can trust this. Not only in terms of what it gives us, and also in terms of what it basically embeds into the next follow-up from the AI. That's where actually can have severe impact on us, and we should be extra careful.
No, absolutely. There's some interesting research, isn't there, out there at the moment around, the pools, if you like, of knowledge that are being trawled in terms of generating sort of the AI answers to different things. And what does that really mean? Who is that really representing? Again, these things are fascinating, aren't they? Sorry, Judith, did you want to come in on that one? No. Misread that signal. Okay. Right. So I guess it feels to me that a lot of this conversation so far has been sort of talking about a lot of different aspects of practice and better practice and so on as we've been going along. But I guess it's also, predicated on the fact that this is in good times, shall we say. What happens when people, systems, processes, etc., are under pressure? And then perhaps we start to see the worst side, shall we say, in terms of behaviours and that cultural piece we've been talking about and so on coming through. It's not easy, is it, to get some of this right? And I just wonder whether we might then just unpack and explore a little bit the pieces around, how does this work when people are either under pressure themselves, or when you're in a safety critical environment perhaps, or a commercially driven environment where, things are running a bit hot, shall we say, and it's really critical and so on. Do we see a difference in terms of the way that some of these behaviours play out in those sorts of environments? There's a lot of nodding going on the panel right now. Let's see where should I go first. Susan, go on. I think you could start us off on this.
Well,
I'm thinking everybody else
just
wants to
given
come
me
in.
another in to say the words operating model again.
Excellent.
So, I think with these high pressure situations, it's all about the resilience you've built before they occur. So this takes me back to school, that whole teacup analogy, thinking clearly under pressure is only possible when you're standing on some really solid foundations, and an operating model, the governance, the processes, the people, the capabilities that enable you to naturally reach into things that are already there with a guardrail set in a really short space of time. So it's the work that you do before the pressure situation occurs that enables you to think clearly under pressure, and how naturally you draw on those operating model elements to run your business, to make decisions.
Sure. No, I think I would agree. And I guess in kind of turning to others on the panel, do we see examples where that's actually happening? Or is this, again, a nice to have and an area we need to start to develop? Rahim, do you want to come in on that one?
I mean, just echoing what Susan mentioned here, basically, that's really important, because under pressure, that's where we actually always revert to hierarchy. We'll basically go for speed instead of reflection. And that's where really those foundations that we have built before matters here, because that's where actually you can rely on, okay, what's basically what I have the muscle memory for, what they have built along the way, so that can help me and go through this, because that's where maybe your critical thinking will be more diminished, and you will be more resorted on what you have already been put in practice. This is really, that's where I would say that it's really important to see that this is something that has been built over the time, and now that's where we see it in action, basically.
Yeah, and I guess that's where some of it can be codified and turned into processes and normal ways of doing things, and you have to hope that will come good when it's actually needed. We've got to come to air traffic control on this one, surely.
So we do see this quite a lot when we've got fixed deadlines. When we make airspace changes or system changes, we need to inform the whole aviation community so that the pilots are in the sky at the time have got the right maps and they know where they're going. If the airspace has changed and they've got different waypoints and so on. So it's absolutely critical getting those things right, and it has to be timely. Now, as in any organisation, I'm sure we've all experienced those pop-up things when something's come out of testing and suddenly there's an issue nobody thought of, nobody expected. How are we going to work with that? Now we're all engineers, and we can think up solutions around that. And sometimes we have to say, well, there's a fix coming, but we've still got to go ahead, and there's some procedural workarounds we have to put in place. And my team will look at those and assess those for the how much risk or we're carrying forward. And I think that's where the human element really comes in, because the poor controllers who are on the receiving end of the change have got to deal with it. And if they've got workaround on top of workaround, that becomes quite stressful, and we have to manage that. And we've actually had a case recently where we had a big political PR, if you like, that we were going to lose by not going forward with the changes that we were very much embedded with some of our partners who were going forward without us. And we decided actually what was being proposed wasn't safe for us. It may have been for them, but it wasn't for us. And it was just too much cognitive workload for our controllers to put further workarounds in place. And there's a lot of perhaps backlash from the controllers about that. So you have to really listen to that. That's where the psychological safety comes in to its own. We've really got to listen to the people who are actually at the coalface, so to speak. And we actually decided not to go forward. And somewhat, smirkingly, we saw our partners have problems when they went into operation. All safe, I hasten to add. But we lost some face. We lost some PR value, but we made the right decision, and I stand by with those decisions that we did take by listening to what the people in the organisation were saying.
And I guess you never know, do you? Because you can only ever take one path forward, but you just know that the reason that you chose that path was for that set of reasons, which has to, in itself, have been the best possible decision you could have made, even though you don't know that's impossible. Judith, I feel you must have something to add on this point.
I think for me, it comes back to the point that was made earlier about this is about valuing human beings always, valuing being human and all the different views and so on that brings. So for me, when you're under pressure, it's not just what you do, it's how you go about it. So, in my world, very often that's been around, a major safety incident. If the immediate gut reaction is to look for who's to blame, then that will take you down a very, very dark route. If your immediate reaction is, I need to understand why this happened and what I can learn from it, then you will be looking for the human value in all of that and being human in the way that you attack the problem.
Absolutely. No, I think that's very true. Now, we are very, very nearly out of time for this section of today's event. I just wanted to close, and it is slightly unfair because our panel have had no warning of this, but it's because I lost the iPad, right? And it was actually one of the questions that was on there. I just wondered in closing whether if each of you in turn were to pick on just one thing in terms of the next step in this space, how could we do something quite specific differently in terms of psychological safety and making things that little bit better? What each one of you might pick on, in the hope that you might pick on 4 different things. Let's see what happens, shall we? Shall we run our way from the far end of the panel down to here? Is that fair?
I'm the unfortunate one to go first.
Well, and you can pass, but only once.
So I think for me, it's about recognizing that, certainly myself in the leadership role, I recognize that that's a position of privilege. And it's about lowering the bar for others to come forward. So I could talk about an example that's very personal to me, but demonstrating your own vulnerabilities. So you probably don't see the fact that I'm sitting here. I'm not very well at the moment. I suffer from ulcerative colitis.
Susan moves away.
And this is a lifelong condition. There's no cure for it. It goes into flares and remission and so on. You can't see that, but I'm certainly feeling it. But talking about that has, I never thought before doing the inclusive leadership program, I never thought I'd be on a stage talking about something so personal. But actually, one of the examples where I've talked about that in my team, I saw a lady in my team who works up at our FREng centre, and she was afraid of travelling down south to come and visit us. She said, I just can't travel. It's medical reasons. And I talked about my issues, and she actually, her jaw dropped. It's like, wow, that's what I've got. That's my problem. I've never been able to talk to anyone about this. And that really resonated with me, that I'd actually allowed someone to come forward and share that. So I think, demonstrating your own vulnerabilities, we've all got them, right? So let's be open about it.
Absolutely. Susan.
Yes, I was just thinking about my own vulnerability there. I'm curious about this. We all make mistakes. I'm hoping that's not written there because someone's looked at my LinkedIn and thought we need to put that on her badge. So my parting thought, I guess, is for everyone, and it's a bit difficult because this room is full of self-selected people who are interested in inclusion. But for everyone to think about their intent and, picking up on what's already been said today, which is we can't know everything about other people. And so going in with an intent to listen and learn, and that your intent is to make things inclusive. And sometimes you will make mistakes, and that's okay as long as you're able to learn.
Absolutely. No, I like that one. Raheem?
So I think the one thing that I'm actually now with the team we're working on is the inclusion part, because I'm working with a team across different specialties. So I think the one thing that we are trying with the team to work and actively, that's why I'm excited to be here and also learn more about this as well, is to see like how we can actually make everyone speak and heard.
Yeah.
We are working on different potential, but this is like, we are trying to make sure that we are increasing like transparency in the communication we do, and trying to make room for everyone as we are talking on those projects, even in a smaller team or a bigger team, to make sure that we are actually collecting those voices and making clear to the people that those has been actually heard and noted.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So very much echoing one of the points, Judith, I think you were making. They're different things, aren't they?
Yeah.
Saying the thing and hearing the thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Your one thing, if it wasn't that?
My one thing would be to come back to a point I made earlier about the power of allyship.
Yeah.
We need everyone in this room to be allies. It's not just about getting yourself heard.
Absolutely.
It's about committing to playing a role in your organisation where you help others get heard by pointing out that they've just said something that everyone else needs to listen to.
Yeah.
And if we all did that, it would make a massive difference. And it would demonstrate inclusion, and that we're looking out for everyone else, not just for ourselves.
Absolutely. And if others then started to echo that, you never know, it might just start to actually work. And I think for me, if I had to sort of add one very brief thought onto the end of that list, it actually sort of builds quite neatly, almost as if we planned it. But we didn't, this bit. I think my sort of one ad would be that what I think is great about this conversation today, and more generally around this topic, is that literally everybody can do something differently from right now. This isn't something you need any further sort of training and development or any sort of special knowledge or skills or whatever. We all kind of have a gut instinct for what is a little bit more right. So I guess that would be my challenge really, in terms of saying let's all try to be part of that sense of change, and to be confident that we're not the only ones trying to do it, because it's very obvious from today that we're absolutely not. So we are out of time. It is time for a break, you'll be pleased to hear. So thank you very much to our panel, first of all, for taking part in such a rich conversation. Thank you very much to everybody online. Thank you very much to all of you who are here in the room with us today. It feels like this is very much the tip of the iceberg. It was only ever going to be the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? Because these are such huge topics. But I feel that we're beginning to really recognise and be able to unpack it in a slightly more mature way, perhaps, than has been the case over, however many past years. So obviously we've got a long way to go. It'll never be done. That was another one of the questions on the iPad. It'll never be done. There will always be something better to do. But actually, hopefully this has given everybody a little bit of an onward sort of kick and a spur forward in terms of saying, right, there is much more that we could just get on with and do, and that we're actually in control of. So thank you very much, all of you. Let's go. I think we hand it back over to Rose, or I think brief. I think we're all, yes, that's right, to give us further instructions on what happens next. Thank you.
Please join us in welcoming the panel. Thank you. Thank you all so much. There were some incredible insights, and I think there's lots that we can all be taking into practice and into the break as we all share over a cup of tea. So we will have a short break now, and we'll be back at 12 o'clock. And those of you who are in the room, you will have noticed, as Susan shared, kind of on your badges, you have some slogans. So it might say, "No blame here," to Dame Judith's point earlier. "Heights are scary. Work shouldn't be," or "Everyone makes mistakes." Now, these are intended as conversation starters, so do use them as icebreakers as you connect with others across the community. For those joining online, we'd also love you to join us as well. So please do share in the chat any stories or experiences that really resonate, with these themes for you. We'll be back at 12 o'clock for our next session, which will be a series of micro talks exploring how psychologically safe engineering allows us to engineer inclusive outcomes in practice. So we look forward to seeing you then. Enjoy the break. Thank you. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Welcome back. Fantastic. I hope you're feeling very refreshed after the break. Those of you who are watching at home, I hope you managed to reach for that pack of biscuits you've been saving for an emergency. We are going to dive straight into our micro talks now, which will be exploring how we can engineer inclusively in practice. I'm delighted to welcome our Chief Operating Officer, Cecilia Harvey, to the stage. Please welcome Cecilia.
Oh, I love the new title. Okay. Tell my boss. Okay. So thank you, everybody. As Rosa said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Royal Academy of Engineering. We're now going to move into our next session, which is our program that's going to be on micro talks. So this session forms a very important bridge between this morning's strategic reflections on psychological safety and the interactive workshops that you're going to go through later on in the afternoon. Earlier, we explored why inclusion and psychological safety matter. These micro talks are really going to shift us firmly into how they can be delivered in practice. Each of our speakers are going to share a very concise, high impact case study demonstrating how their organization is embedding equity, diversity, and inclusion into engineering in very tangible and measurable ways. You'll hear examples of inclusive design processing, community-informed decision-making, and also governance models and accessibility-led innovation, all translating inclusive content into engineering outcomes. The format is going to be very simple. We're going to have 4 speakers presenting in pairs. Each speaker is going to deliver a 10-minute presentation. After both have spoken, I'll invite them back to the stage, and we'll have a joint 10-minute Q&A session, and then we'll repeat that format with the second pair of speakers. So let's begin with our first 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Susan Gorvinak from the University of Southampton. Professor Gorvinak is internationally recognized as an expert in offshore geotechnical engineering, with foundation design methods now embedded in international standards governing industry practice globally. Alongside her technical leadership, she is a passionate advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and a champion of multidisciplinary collaboration, working across engineering, life sciences, social sciences, and the arts to address complex global challenges. Following Susan, we'll hear from Praneeth Reddy Chadha from Google. Praneeth is a senior accessibility analyst and a subject matter expert at Google, where he leads the integration of inclusive design into the Google Play ecosystem. With over 10 years of experience in accessibility, he champions a shift-left methodology, embedding accessibility as a foundational technical requirement from the outset. Through his work at the Accessibility Discovery Center, he bridges engineering and the disability community to drive research-led globally scalable innovation. Please welcome me in joining please join me in welcoming Professor Gorvanek and Praneeth to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk today. And I'd like to share just some ED&I considerations around end of engineered life, particularly through the perspective of a program that I have the privilege of being involved in called Engineering X. It's one of the flagship initiatives of the Royal Academy of Engineering in partnership with the Lloyd's Register Foundation. And since 2019, I've also had the privilege to lead the Safer End of Engineered Life for Offshore Infrastructure and Ships initiative that is part of Safer End of Engineered Life, along with a fantastic board and academy team who are here today as well. And our activity initially was very much focused around the oil and gas industry, decommissioning from the oil and gas industry offshore, and also from ship recycling. And that was as a result of consulting with a diverse range of stakeholders as the key priorities that needed some addressing. But more recently, over the last few years, we've had a more proactive shift to be forward-looking towards the energy transition and the volume of assets from offshore wind that are going to be coming up for decommissioning and end-of-life management, to make sure that we're ready for some of those challenges, so as not to replicate some of the processes and the practices that have been allowed to emerge and establish themselves for offshore infrastructure and ships from oil and gas. So I'm just going to share a few of the key activities, some of the outputs, some of the key learnings from those experiences. So one of the things that we started with was having a scoping and research across the offshore sector to try and identify this diverse range of stakeholders to bring people together. Some of those people were from well-known parts of the sector, but very importantly, we really tried to seek out those voices that were perhaps often unheard or overlooked. And just as a connection here, Shelley used to work on the Engineering X program when this all started in 2019 as well. So I was very involved in this workshop too. And so we brought together these 58 participants from 21 different countries, and they really were engaged in a whole range of different elements of the offshore oil and gas and the shipping sector from across the world. And many of them acknowledged that they had never been in the same room with people in those different parts of the sector before, and it was really a fantastic opportunity to unearth some of those tensions and priorities that different groups of people had in a very sort of human and personal way. So I don't expect you to read this slide, but the first day of our workshop was really about trying to unearth what these key challenges were. And the point here is to show that there are many of them. Many of them are engineering ones. They're about facilities and infrastructure and so on. But many of them are around whether it's regulation or political or socioeconomic or awareness and knowledge challenges and barriers. And we noted that there are many engineering solutions, not just to the engineering challenges, but also to those whole range of other challenges that were identified throughout the day. And also interesting that Post-it notes and Butcher's paper really transcends an awful lot of boundaries as well. So as a result of that first day of activity, the participants, they self-selected into groups sort of through a semi-structured process on the second day to put forward and develop some projects that could then go on to be funded. So they went away drawing on their broader networks to apply for some funds to help enable those projects. So a number of different projects were funded. There's some examples here. And they all, they ended up with a range of different outputs. Very often about bringing a community together that had not previously worked together, whether that was across sectors or whether that was across borders. Many led to guidance notes or standards or regulation. They led to open access databases for knowledge sharing and raising awareness. They led to representation of workers in shipyards. And then they led to like the voluntary collective of ship owners who would sign up to responsible shipbreaking practices. So a whole range of different outputs. And perhaps from that, our key learnings are that bringing people together can really have transformative effects. Participatory approaches to developing regulations and standards really works. Technology is so empowering for knowledge exchange and raising awareness, not just for sort of delivering the infrastructure and the engineering processes. Raising awareness, whether that is of injustice and inequality or of the good practices, is really effective in effecting change. And of course, this interplay of economics, law, social pressures and norms, along with engineering, underpins many of the challenges and therefore underpins many of the solutions. And really that addressing the end-of-life challenge at the design stage initially really will help to reduce the challenge of end-of-engineered life when it arrives at the end of the design life. And what we really could take away is the consequences of bad end-of-life management are bad for workers, it's bad for the environment, and it is bad for communities. And this is not an out-of-place photograph. 80% of the world's ships end up on 3 beaches in Southeast Asia being decommissioned in conditions very similar to this. And so looking forward, it was very clear that as we approach the energy transition and an enormous asset base from offshore wind, we really must be ready. So don't replicate and reinforce these practices that have been allowed to take place in other sectors. So here we can see like the increase in offshore wind since the first one was installed in the early 1990s, and it was pretty rapid. But this is really eclipsed by the forecast growth of offshore wind to the mid-century in order to meet those net zero targets. And then we can see that 25 years later, that is the decommissioning asset base. And so we really need to be ready. It's a challenge, but it is an opportunity because the sector is relatively new when we look at the graph on the right-hand side. And so we can get in early, put in place those structures and those processes and try and develop that culture to have responsible end-of-life management for offshore wind. And so learning on some of the things that happened in the first part of the decommissioning of offshore infrastructure and ships programme, we consulted widely, we did lots of scoping, set out a challenge statement, and on that consulted across the sector and across countries and hosted another international workshop. And from that, a whole host of different findings and recommendations emerged, but 4 key ones. And the first one of those was to call on the sector to sort of convene an end-of-life working group that sort of transcended borders and the sector in order to be able to address the other 3, which are principally around inclusive but adaptable regulation, circularity, and skills. And as a result of this, a global end-of-life offshore wind committee has been formed with the aim of safe, circular, sustainable and inclusive end-of-life management for offshore wind infrastructure globally. It is underpinned by 4 key values of safety, circularity, sustainable and inclusive leadership. So all actions must be underpinned by all 4 of those values. And the committee is being taken forward under the expert stewardship of 2 chairs who were appointed to this role, Dr. Anne Vellenturf and Lorna Bennett, and is being run in partnership with the World Forum for Offshore Wind to really tap in to their international network. So there are 4 task and finish groups that have been identified as the priority areas to begin to address. And in January, we had a workshop in Brussels where a team of people got together to try and sort of identify like who should be part of those, who could be part of those, and what the first actions should be. And we can see Nina in that top right figure. She is going to lead one of the groups on international regulations. She most recently led the roadmap for the Dutch government for end-of-life for offshore wind. And very importantly, I think the guy sitting next to her, Omar, he was at our first workshop in 2019 and has become an absolute stalwart of the End of Engineered Life mission. So just to wrap up then, I think the key recommendations, which I hope are, applicable across sectors, are to consult widely. It's really important to understand the challenge from all perspectives. We've heard that much today already. Bring people together to really be able to unearth the different priorities and the tensions, as well as the shared goals across different sectors. Create a community, so there's that forum for continued communication and collaboration. Work in partnership, so you can scale your inputs, your outputs, your impact. Know your values and stick to them, and that they are the legs of the stool. So it's not just one or two, you need them all underpinning what you do. Forecast and plan, particularly for end of life, around embedding circularity throughout the life cycle. So we need to design for decommissioning to do it right. And the engineering is, of course, at that intersection with regulation and standards, the supply chain, the communities, and economics. And if you would like to know more, please visit the Engineering X website. It's much bigger than just say for End of Engineered Life. And Sophie and Maya are in the room somewhere, who run the program right at the back if you want to talk to them in person as well. But yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. My name is Praneeth. I'm an accessibility analyst at Google, and today we are going to learn about engineering for the reality through the lens of Accessibility Discovery Center and how we are translating inclusion from theory to the process. Right. So as engineers, we are trained to solve complex problems by creating standardized models. We often build in quiet spaces with high-speed internet in a perfect lab equipment and environment, and we often optimize our code and hardware for an idealized user persona. But here is the reality. The perfectly standardized user or an ideal persona does not exist. Human reality is beautifully diverse and it is beautifully messy. Reality is trying to navigate a complex interface while carrying the groceries or trying to hear to an audio cue in a crowded environment like a pub or a train station. When we design strictly within a perfect lab environment, there is a profound disconnect that forms between the technology that we are building and the way our communities actually live. And in that very disconnect, we often have people with different disabilities face unintended barriers. This is a huge problem, and in our effort to address this at Google, we realized that we needed an environment where our engineering teams are invited to step out of the theoretical models or step out of theoretical best practices and start engage with the human reality. And that's the purpose of Accessibility Discovery Center, or ADC. ADC isn't just a platform for us to broadcast what we know or the technology that we have. It's a space for us to listen to the needs of user community. Everyday visitor from all walks of life, those with lived experiences, family members, and colleagues walk through the doors of ADC and challenge our assumptions or what we know about accessibility. We understand that what we think may be useful in a perfect lab might not be as useful for somebody who is actually holding the device in reality. People often ask how this space changes the way we are building the things. The answer lies in collaboration with those we are here to serve. Through this collaboration, we are trying to uncover the hidden friction points that users face today, and we are moving from empathy as a buzzword to being empathy as a data point. And it's all about listening to the experts of lived experience, and it kind of creates a feedback loop which drives a cultural shift. And we aren't just making new products here, we are remaking how we think about accessibility and how we think about user interaction with the products. Historically, the tech industry has often treated accessibility as a final assurance checkpoint. 10 years back, I started in an industry like that where I was doing the QA for an accessibility, and it was no different. An engineer builds the product, and too late, at very end of the life cycle, they hand it to a disabled user and ask, does this product work for you? And by the time the design is locked, the architecture is locked, and any fundamental barrier or any basic issue requires an expensive rework and a huge technical debt. But I'm not about talking the business cost here. Business cost is just only half the story. The actual cost is borne by the user. When accessibility is bolted on at the very end, at the last minute, the resulting solutions often feel fragmented or clunky. An app might technically pass a compliance checklist. You might have all ticked the check boxes that you intend to do, but then navigating it remains an exhausting process. It sends a clear message or an unintended message to the user community that you are an afterthought. And when this product launches with these barriers, people with disabilities are forced to find workarounds to achieve the basic independence or to basically use the app. So we recognize that to build technology that truly respects and empowers our user community, we cannot fix a flawed foundation. We had to change the foundation itself. And we are doing that by operationalizing a simple principle called nothing about us without us. So unless you involve people with disabilities in the conversation, unless you involve them in the way you're building things, we never know that what we're building is right and actually useful for them. Deeply integrate user feedback across the entire product lifecycle. It also reshapes the psychological safety and behavior of your teams. It shifts the mindset from, did I meet a technical specification, to did I actually solve the human friction? When an engineer is sitting next to a user with limited motor control in the ADC and collaborate with them on a prototype, it creates a psychologically safe space. It makes it perfectly acceptable for the engineer to say, okay, my initial assumption was wrong. How can I do it better? Or how we can make sure this is accessible. So it turns those moments of friction into shared moments of discovery. So how we work in ADC? This collaboration happens with user community across 3 distinct phases in the ADC. First, in ideation, we just don't ask users what they would like or what are the features that they want in the product that they are using. We observe how they interact with their environment to ensure they are solving the right problem. We map out the daily friction points that we have before a single wireframe is drawn. And when moving to design and prototyping, our teams bring in early physical models or the early prototypes, and we observe the cognitive load on the user navigating through that particular menu system or navigating to the particular app. And we try to understand, and this allows us to catch any architectural problems or any basic issues with the concept, which drastically reduces the risk before even we move into the development. And finally, in the development, the real world validation. People with disabilities might use an existing screen reader or different switch devices that they have. And our responsibility is to make sure whatever we are building is actually accessible with whatever the user is currently using. Let me give you a tangible engineering example of how designing with a community completely changes a design outcome. In 2023, we developed an app called as Pixel Magnifier. It helps users with low vision to zoom in on tiny text, identify and view the distant objects, or basically apply high contrast filters and zoom in on any text. So the challenge for us is, before its public launch, we need to kind of know whatever we are building for the users is actually useful for them. We partnered with RNIB, Royal National Institute of Blind, to bring in a low user community. We brought this feature into ADC for the user testing because low vision is not a monolith. An engineer cannot simply guess the correct contrast ratio from a textbook or not. They can currently assume what level of different filters that the users would require, because the requirements of people with low vision are diverse and distinctive to people who completely rely on a screen reader. And if we have skipped this step, we would have built an app based upon the standard definitions of vision loss, which we have, rather than the lived reality. So during testing in the ADC, we didn't just ask if the Zoom worked. We observed the user as they are navigating the app. We observed the cognitive load in terms of discovering the features or in terms of watching them interact with the filters in different lighting conditions. We actually created a fake bistro table with a distant restaurant menu to identify if the users can zoom in on the text and understand the entire menu. So the insights we gather from these experts of lived experience fundamentally shape the final UI. It ensured that the physical gestures required to adjust zoom or contrast didn't demand an impossible accuracy or precision from them. It drove decisions to simplify the controls and all the buttons to ensure that tool was immediately accessible to the user in a high stress environment. By bringing low vision community into the space before the launch, we just didn't ship the product, but we shipped the confidence. We ensured that the technology that we are building is actually matching the human reality. And this is one of the profound lessons that we learn every day. When you design for the edges, when you design for the extreme constraints, you actually develop and you actually build systems that are more resilient, intuitive, and universally accessible for all the users. Also, to quote Rama, like when you design for the edges, you get the middle for free or you get the center for free. Again, as you move into your workshops this afternoon, I want you all to kind of think about the concept you are developing or the infrastructure or the blueprint that you are trying to engineer. Ask yourself one question: who am I unintentionally locking out? Because when we embed inclusive design into our engineering culture from the very beginning, we stop building for a hypothetical persona and we start engineering for the reality of our communities. Thank you.
Right. All right. So I absolutely love both of those and incredibly powerful insights. So thank you both. What I'd love to ask the both of you right now is that both of you spoke about embedding inclusion at the earliest stages of engineering work, which is absolutely essential. But can you just sort of explain what do you think the biggest barrier of that is in terms of achieving that shift, especially across industry today?
So, well, I think they are manyfold, but I think in industries such as offshore, where there's lots of big supply chains, there's lots of big assets, like any changes along those always has like an interface with the next step or the next process. So I think sometimes it can seem overwhelming. This is how we've always done it, and we just have to keep doing it like that. So I think, yeah, well, just getting everybody together, bringing people together to really identify, what are the shared goals and like actually how can we go ahead and make it happen is probably the most meaningful way to have an effect.
I agree.
Yeah, I think I agree to Susan as well. When in accessibility, when we are trying to develop things, we often have standardized models or we do have a predefined checklist. Okay, if you are trying to build these features, we are catering to people with these many disabilities and etc. But in reality, the way actually users interact with the product or interact with your app might be different to what you are assuming on your desk while developing these features. So it's only when the users are actually invited into the space, we could interact with them and it kind of break our assumptions and the preconceived idea of what the users might be having challenges were completely different, and we could actually now develop to the reality of the users. I've spent over 10 years in accessibility, and it's only last year, I'm not shameful in accepting it, but people who are deaf, I thought, okay, we are developing captions, we are trying to include, alternate forms rather than the sound. But it's only last year that I heard that for people who are deaf, sign language is their first language and English comes next, or any other language that comes next. And this space has made me interact and given me an opportunity to learn these things.
I love that. Oh, thank you. Susan, question for you. You've influenced international offshore engineering standards, but can you tell us just a bit more about what you've learned about getting inclusive thinking accepted at standard setting levels, which is a completely different thing.
Well, yes. So, well, I suppose the thing with international standards is that it always has to be like a consensus. So in some ways, like it can be a bit of a race to the bottom of like the minimum that is going to, be acceptable to everybody. So again, it is, of course, there is a lot of fantastic engineering and technology behind it all, but I really think it is about having those trusted relationships with all the people who are involved on your committee for a particular standard. So you really all can understand where everybody's coming from, what the pinch points are for people who seem terribly resistant to changing anything, and then like working on that as your way forward. So it's a long process to get things into international standards as well. And so sometimes by the time they get in, the sector has really moved on a little bit. So they're uninclusive by the time you get them there. But I think it's that gradual, churn of keeping them updated and having those supporting documents, guidance notes, and, not mandatory standards that can help move the sector along. So by the time they hit the international standards, people are ready.
Certainly not easy. Yeah. No, thank you. Praneeth,
Yeah.
can you share an example from the Accessibility Discovery Center where feedback from disabled users directly changed an engineering or product design?
Yeah, I can't remember something on top of my mind, but there is one very practical example where I had a direct conversation with a user with disabilities. So a couple of years back, we launched an app called as Guided Frame on your Pixel mobile. It will allow for people who are blind to take their selfies and also take the photographs of their external environment. And there was a minor glitch where when the technology was not able to identify the person in the frame, there was a message that is conveyed that there are no objects in the frame. The user was amused that I'm not an object, I'm a person. So we had to kind of act immediately and change that before users, try to find that, okay, the technology is not speaking to me and it's not working for me. So we had to then modify that statement as there are no persons or objects in the frame. It's also trying to and it's not, in terms of not exact products, but it's the philosophy, it's the idea, and it's also the day-to-day interaction patterns that we are observing from the user. It's actually influencing my approach in work.
Yes.
Previously, let's say when I only based upon standardized checklist, now I'm trying to kind of add the real feedback which I learned from the user, and that is influencing the way we are building products today.
I love it. No, thank you. And for both of you, in what ways can you measure impact in your respective contexts? Standards in offshore engineering versus accessibility in digital ecosystems. Who wants to go first? Okay.
Susan.
So I think drawing on the panel discussion this morning, you can have the regulations, they need to be complied with, they need to be relevant, but it's really about the valuing the human and getting all the humans in the loop to make them as most appropriate as possible, so they will be more likely to be applied and complied with. But yeah, regulation is only one part, in the same way that engineering is only ever one part of a solution. You need to get the people on board. So I think that is how we have impact. And I think through Engineering X, that's like a particularly powerful part of Engineering X. The engineering is obviously very important, but it's that convening the groups and providing that forum for those people to continue to communicate and collaborate, and they have the impact.
I could not agree more. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, pressure and ROI, these are pressure questions for me. So these are the questions that I get asked from my leadership, like what is the impact of the new process that you are trying to develop, or what's the impact of the ADC? Why we cannot see the direct impact? It's almost the feedback from the user, how they are finding your products to be much more accessible and delightful. And when you get that moment of learning from the user that I use YouTube or I use Google Drive, and for I use Google Meet, and I'm a person with hearing challenges, and I have captions helping me to prepare my notes. I have captions help me to understand whatever is going on. And now with Gemini, the opportunities are endless. So I think these direct feedbacks from the user tells us we are doing the right work, and also the feedback from the user also kind of motivates us. There is more to do in this space.
I love that point. I love that point. Okay, wonderful. No, thank you both. I'd love for us to all join in applause just to thank our two initial speakers. That's brilliant. It's fantastic. Now, we're going to repeat it again, people. We're going to move on to our second pair of micro talks. So, our next speaker is Jenny McLaughlin, speaking on REBA's Inclusive Design Overlay. So the REBA Inclusive Design Overlay was developed to address a key industry challenge, which is the lack of single shared reference point for embedding inclusive design across the REBA plan of work. Created collaboratively by over 100 professionals across 25 built environment disciplines, the overlay structured guidance across 5 key roles from client through to asset management and outlines how inclusive design leads can support successful and sustainable outcomes. Following Jenny, we'll hear from George Oates from Expedition Engineering. Expedition Engineering, part of the Useful Simple Trust, is a structural and civil engineering, architecture, and sustainability practice delivering projects with positive social and environmental impact. Through participation in the Royal Academy of Engineering's Inclusive Leadership Program, with the guidance from Professor Dawn Bonfield, the team developed a practical, theory of change-based inclusive design tool. This approach helps project teams link design decisions directly to measurable inclusive outcomes, moving inclusion from abstract discussion to tangible engineering action. Please join me in welcoming Jenny and George to the stage. Thank you.
As I have the privilege of the floor, I'm going to start with my why. For I seek to inspire a rebellion, as it's hard to learn what we already think we know. I believe you all rank safety as important, feel responsible and accountable. But do you really know how to keep each other safe if you don't or can't experience safety as others do? It's human nature, given all the information we process, to feel uncomfortable in the space between knowing and not knowing. Wanting to make the right decision, but overwhelmed by the complexity. Feeling the cognitive energy required, maybe without the capacity to give or space to think. The fear of failure promotes our desire to circumnavigate this discomfort, to instead of expending the energy, potentially self-doubt, to rely on external structures, processes, and standards. They form our knowing, from which we engineer our design. Yet unconsciously, we know and feel a friction. For this external bar is by definition what we accept and expect. Stood at the edge of a platform, reflecting on the yellow words to keep us safe, stepping up and out, others silently doing the same, felt like a bold analogy. That throughout our everyday, how many times do we accept or mask our discomfort at being required to adapt to a world that hasn't considered our access needs, whether permanent disability since birth or acquired through age, a temporary illness or injury, or situationally disabled. Like the time I knew in my gut I was not safe, my size 5 foot still walked across the rebar. Even as a client, I did not feel safe enough to speak up, afraid I'd be judged as less than. What chance do others have to say this wasn't designed for me to be safe? For we shape our tools and hereafter they shape us. We all believe our cars are certified safe, yet research has shown as women, I'm 74% more likely to die or be severely injured in a car accident. How can the design standard used be considered safe? There are many examples of bias if we choose to look.
PPE designed around a male Caucasian face, risk and method statements not checked for ease of understanding when 1 in 10 is likely dyslexic. Use of green and red in safety signs or design drawings, even though 1 in 12 men are colorblind. If the standards and systems we use are flawed and biased, can we truly say we know how to keep each other safe? For it seems evident to everyone, experiences safety differently. You can't normalize something we treat as an exception to the rule. Here lies the gap. For there is no mythical average. Look around you. Everyone is beautifully unique. We need to normalize the difference, anticipate it. If we continue to believe we've negated our responsibility for assumption and bias made by somebody else applied in a standard or process, if we aren't curious of how to check and see within our own legislation, such as CDM, that it requires us to see how every person, any person, is safe, can we truly say we're putting safety first? This is where the inclusive design overlay steps in, and why I was a key member of the steering group that looked at not just designing for the user, but designing for the maintainer, the operator, and the builder, to provide a framework to apply that legislation that already exists. We all have a duty to anticipate that difference, to engineer better, more inclusive and equitably safe designs. The ask is to review with the identified roles, recognizing the gaps and applying a lens that everyone experiences safety uniquely. Everyone has access needs, just some of us don't have to worry about whether they will be met. The roles form a key part of the project team who have the ability through collaboration that can engineer solutions that keep everyone safe and everyone being able to build, operate and maintain as well as use. It was created, as Cecilia said, by a team of rebels who believe that inclusive design could and should be at the heart of all design. They listened and incorporated the reviews across the industry, and it's still to this day the most downloaded overlay, and it has been embedded in Heathrow, where I work. The key sections support each role to understand the ask of them, what the enablers are to ensuring inclusive outcomes, supports the understanding of the key terms for shared collaboration. Have I missed? I have not followed my slides. Okay. This is the one I meant to do. So that was the create team of people. So it shows, because I can't actually read the thing over there. And this was navigating through the inclusive design and supporting the understanding of the key terms in the shared collaboration. And now we're on to the inclusion as standard at Heathrow. Apologies for that. At Heathrow, we have adopted the flow into our existing Gateway lifecycle that mirrors the plan of work stages, identifying engagement, reviewing and recording of the decisions, and feeding back our learning at the end of the project. This continuous improvement, we have done this with the Wheel of Considerations tool to help us understand the level of engagement required. This we use the measurement tool, which works around the pearls. So we co-created as part of the Equitable Safety Initiative with Carly from Arup and Emily from Costain. What the pearls do is they provide a lens which you can interrogate all of your design decisions by applying the people, understanding the different demographics, looking at the environment and where are the constraints, what standards would you be applying, what processes will need to be done, and then looking at the activities for how often have we designed and not thought about the activities that those are undertaking. As Prashir was saying, those user input is incredibly important. And what we then have is the outcome, which is the risks. What safety risks can we not mitigate? What safety risks are still going to be there that processes, I think the guy from NATS was saying, there are still processes and other things that have to be built in afterwards. And what can we build into legacy? What can we ensure that we are sharing and collaborating across industry? What changes can we make that improves this inclusion, this equitable safety for all? And all of that is done within systems thinking. For I think everybody has talked about actually it's the system that we work within that gives us this mechanism, this operating model that we can ensure that this is all delivered by. So what are my 3 key points that I'd like you to take away? One, I think has been spoken on a lot, which is user group engagement, understanding the barriers of those that will be utilizing the tool. Because what you are not changing, you are choosing. We have the power as leaders to stop holding up a system that we acknowledge has safety and cultural gaps. We can design that strategy from the get-go within the briefs, within the documentation. That early integration of your views, your values, your vision is important to ensure that the culture is embedded within the project and the program to deliver on all of those aspects. And then monitoring and reviewing those outcomes, being consciously incompetent and start to systematically include by using the REBA inclusive design overlay, by utilizing tools such as the wheel of considerations or others that will be talked about next. You can support the delivery of safety and belonging for all.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello. So I feel somewhat reducing this august room and speakers, and I'm going to be talking about something, bringing the level down, something really quite detailed in comparison. So bear with us. We're here because we were part of the inclusive leadership program that Chris was this last year with the Royal Academy, which is amazing. And as part of that program, that you have to do a project to draw on the things that you've learned and to take that back into your organization and think about what you can do in the wider space. And we decided to make a tool that would help us explore inclusive outcomes. So that's what we did. Expedition and the wider trust, as was mentioned in the intro, we are engineers, sustainability consultants. We work at a large range of scales and in different spaces. So we wanted to make a tool that was flexible, that allowed us to think about what we're doing in each of those different spaces. It's very much work in progress. This is not a polished exercise yet. We're still learning. And I think as I wrote that, I was thinking I'm very much work in progress still in this space. And so part of the intention of this tool was to help our whole organization, ourselves, to reflect on and think about what does inclusivity mean as we go through. And as again mentioned in the intro, we've drawn heavily on the work of Professor Dawn Bonfield. And I say any loss of value is represented through our necessary reduction of her hugely important and far-reaching scope of aspects for inclusivity is entirely down to us. And I refer you back to the source material always. So Dawn on her website inkeng.org has a nice definition for what is inclusive engineering, thinking about everybody and thinking about inclusive of everything. And she represents her thinking on inclusivity in this wheel diagram in the middle, and broadly pulls it into 8 different subject areas, from as diverse as cybersecurity through to the SDGs and societal impact. We took that whole kind of spectrum and decided that actually we're going to focus much more for us as a starting point on those that are clearly around societal impact and sort of social value prompts. And so we've drawn out on the right, those hexagons, the areas that we're looking for as our starting points and prompts around employment, education, governance, diversity, and so on. We then took that very broad set of headings, and from Dawn's work took the kind of the bullet points, and then you won't be able to read all of these, but pulled out what we thought were the pertinent kind of areas under each of those subject areas. And we use this sheet as a prompt in the tool that we work with our designers to sort of using as the starting point to think about the areas that we can most affect through our design work and how we can go about that. So the tool itself uses the theory of change approach The theory of change, that you have a series of places you want to get to. Over on the right hand side with the impacts, you have a series of inputs, and then you think about how you get from A to B and the steps along that journey, and really think about the linkages between each of those steps. And it becomes a lovely kind of messy cross diagram when it works well. So our tool was based around starting at the impacts, using that list of kind of impact areas, and thinking about which of those for each particular project we're working on, whether it's a structural design of a bridge or whether it's looking at a residential master plan, what are the impact areas we think we can most successfully affect, and then put that as your starting point, and then effectively work backwards from those impacts all the way back to then draw out what are the inputs, what are the activities that you should be doing now, which is then going to set you up to have the best possible outcome in the future. I've just got a couple of, you're not deliberately not to sort of see all the specific parts of it. We've got two kind of projects that we've used it through with our project teams. The first is a project called the Site Factory, which is a very large building which enables the construction of other major infrastructure pieces within it. And it enables more of a factory environment for that construction process to take place in, with all of the associated positive impacts, whether they be environmental for getting things right first time, or whether they, and importantly, from a diversity point of view, they allow a new workforce into construction that can work on flat floors, that can work with a greater level of craneage than you would have on a normal construction site, and what that might mean if you never have to lift anything while you're doing construction. So starting with the impacts that we thought we could have, drawing those out, and then taking our way backwards to think about the activities that we're now doing and some of the inputs. It flagged areas straight away in the team of new things that we want to commission and new things that we want to be commissioned to undertake in order to advise that process from a kind of a social value assessment of the local areas of where this site factory might be used, to understand the diverse needs of the local environment, to also giving us as the designers a clearer understanding. We've been focusing on the long-term benefit of the factory, but we weren't thinking about the construction of the factory itself. So that gave us we realized by going through this process that we'd missed a whole area for our focus. And so that's put it back into the mix. And I think also just by going through this process and actually having us setting out what we could see as the most positive end, it's a bit like the analogy somebody said, flying to, to get to the moon, you've got to fly to Mars and then come back. By setting out the most positive outcomes, this then enabled us to have a conversation with our direct client about what the wider impact could be of this system, which in turn has then sparked a conversation around, can we even try and measure the economic benefit of some of these social impacts that we can have in society, and start bringing that back to talk about the business case of the project itself. Second project, we are working with the Department for Education on looking at the existing schools that they have, and in light of the rat crisis, how can they sort of start thinking seriously about what may be the next thing that's coming down the line, and also just generally around planned maintenance for a really big, really diverse building estate. And our role in it is very technical. We're helping them understand a very difficult data set and how they can draw learning from it and put lessons together. This activity, using this canvas came up because a colleague had been asked by the client if they could talk about some of the wider impacts, or if they could help the client at the DFE even articulate what some of the wider impacts were. And in doing that and drawing some of those out, particularly around, it drew out a lot around health and well-being of the staff, around the head teachers, thinking about managing budgets and unexpected spend and the stress that's associated with that, and the stress of kind of closing down parts of the school for unforeseen maintenance issues. But one of the learnings that came out was that we're running a pilot study at the moment, which wasn't set up by ourselves, but we realized that there was an inherent bias that had been put into that pilot study because it was opt-in, and because the amount of time that people had to sign up to, and because of where they were able to find it from. And that has enabled us to look then at the results we've got back, bear that in mind, maybe have another lens over looking at those results to try and remove that bias, but also to inform the second round of the pilot that will be taken, so that we have, rather than an opt-in, that we actually go out and make sure we're looking for as diverse a collection of schools and environments as possible. So just pretty much simple conclusions, very much work in progress. It is useful though, and it has led to some really helpful and important conversations with the teams, our project teams, helping us to articulate the wider impact of the projects that we're already working on and where that could go to has been really valuable. It's added a richness to what we do, particularly those of us who sit within quite a narrow lane of structural engineering or civil engineering. To understand the part that what we do can have in a wider piece has been really important. Every time, every single one we've done of these there's been something that's come out of it that said, oh, we need to change that. We need to do something a little bit different. So if nothing else, if there's just even one change per project, that's been a valuable exercise. Taking the client through those outcomes has been really helpful. It's been really strong, was really strengthened a lot of those relationships. And I think clients are looking at us going, okay, wow, you're talking, you're helping us understand what we're doing, and you're talking at a kind of a greater level, which in turn gives us value as well. And just finally, we always want to embed it. So we're talking about systems. We want to embed it into our project practice. We haven't quite got there yet, but I think the flip side is that everybody who's doing it is really enjoying and valuing the conversation and the process that they're working through. And so if nothing else, the exercise of doing it, people are kind of becoming, we're all human. We want to design the human environment as best as we can. And every time we run it, people are going, yes, this is great. This is what I want to. I want to make sure that I'm doing this on this project. So even without having it properly yet fully embedded, we're seeing that it's a valuable thing for us. Thank you.
Let's have a chat. Okay. Hello. Okay. My first question, because I think that this is going to be an area where a few people have a question about it, and an area where a lot of people have a challenge is, what have you seen that works in making a tool or a framework actually used rather than just becoming a document?
For me, it's the why, which is why I started with the why. Talking through the tool doesn't necessarily engage or connect with a person on a personal level. When you can speak to the why, then the purpose becomes obvious. Why wouldn't we do it this way? That makes perfect sense to get the more equitable outcome, the more inclusive design. These are all the things that it will build into. So I think you really have to start with the why.
Agree. No, love that.
I mean, I completely agree. I think we did it back to front. We started with okay, we're just going to try this and see what happens. But where we've seen the success is because that point that people are using it, they're getting the why and they're going, oh, this is, so it's turning to be really helpful, but it's understanding that there's the real value in doing it. I think for us as well, flexibility was really important. We do the ability for people to kind of mess around with it, and it's not fully fixed. It can be added to, as long as it's, for us, promoting that useful conversation. That really works.
Okay, I love that. Just jump in.
Yeah,
I love it. So Jenny, with the inclusive design overlay, it involved just enormous collaboration, which you explained, across so many disciplines. Were there any surprising points of alignment or disagreement? I definitely want to know about the disagreements that you encountered during the development.
I think in terms of alignment, what was really interesting was how applying what was a human-centered, inclusive design approach was as much benefit for those building, maintaining, and operating the infrastructure as it was for those using it. I think quite often before we approached this and the conversations we had across the industry, everybody was looking at the outcome for the users, but had completely forgotten about the builders, maintainers, and operators. And I truly believe the reason why we don't have and can't retain the amount of diversity we want within the engineering is because we don't design for them. and we don't give them the psychological safety to put their hand up and say, this wasn't designed for me. And I think that really, that moment when I reflected back on walking across that rebar and making myself unsafe and not talking about it, I recognized how important it was that we do that. And I think that alignment really sort of stirred the industry to go, right, this could reduce the amount of safety incidents we have. This could improve productivity. This could improve all these other things if we get it right, because we're designing for the humans to be able to build.
Brilliant. Love it. I love what you said. Thank you. George, no pressure. You know, but your tool definitely links design decisions and directly to inclusive outcomes. But how do you see this supporting organizations in building a stronger business case? Because usually that is where the challenge can be.
Organization within our own organization, or just in terms of in the industry?
Within the organization itself, usually, because that's usually where it starts, but then in industry.
So I think, I think it's a key point around using this tool has been quite interesting to get people who are, and Judith Hackitt talked about it earlier, where our industry is very siloed. And we have a real danger of engineers thinking we're solving a technical, structural engineers or civil engineers, we're solving a technical problem. It's there in front of me and that's what I need to do. And getting our engineers to think more broadly by stepping outside of those kind of narrowed lines is really beneficial to them as engineers, but it's brilliantly beneficial to us as an organization. So actually we're sort of getting a very quick feedback loop of going, if we understand our world better and where we fit into it and how we might influence things outside of just this space, then this has a really big business benefit to us. And so we're seeing that already through those kind of stronger client relationships and better designs that are coming out the other side.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. And for both of you, what is one mindset shift that you believe engineering still needs to make before inclusive design becomes genuinely business as usual? I know that's a toughie, isn't it? I know. I'll give you a second to think about it.
So if I was being incredibly provocative, I would
Please
say
do.
the mind shift that needs to happen is that no design is good design unless it has been done inclusively. It's just not good design. And until we mind shift that inclusive design isn't a nice to have soft thing over here, that actually those conversations that you have enable a design that is safer, which is, makes more business sense, has better outcomes, and creates a society that we want to be able to live in.
Agreed. Thank you. George?
Yeah, I'd reinforce that point that it has to happen. So it's in a sense, it is its essentiality that it has to happen. We're looking at redesigning projects and we're thinking about how can we, from their construction side, how can we make them more productive? But it's how do we make them productive? How do we make them more safer? And in doing that, we are inherently, deliberately, therefore also making it more inclusive because we're making better places.
And to build on that, it's interesting, and I am being incredibly provocative now.
Please do.
Yes. It's interesting how it isn't an initial part of all engineering. Agreed. We've been trying to infiltrate the Engineering Council, who I know is in the room, and some others to show that actually without that as being a fundamental aspect of structural, mechanical, or any other, how on earth are we going to create this that we want to be there?
I love that. Engineering Council, okay. Be having a good discussion during the break, I guess. No, that's absolutely brilliant. I want to thank both of you, but also I want to thank all four of our speakers for today. They just shared incredible insights that I know that we'll all definitely have appreciated and really learned a lot from. So thank you, and please join me in thanking all of our speakers, Tom. Brilliant. Thank you. And I'll hand it back over to Rosa.
Thank you so much. I've only got a few things to say before we head into the lunch break. But thank you all all four of you plus Cecilia, thank you so much for that fantastic set of micro talks. It's been really great to be able to see some how this can be done within engineering in action. And I think we are all a work in progress, and that's fantastic way for us to start this afternoon, and when we start looking at what that looks like across engineering industry and how we can progress. So we're now going to pause for lunch. To our online audience, sadly, this is where we say goodbye for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we are really excited to be able to engage you in wider conversations throughout the rest of the year. For those of you here in the room, please do enjoy your lunch break. Lunch will be served just outside. No, it won't. It'll be served downstairs. Lunch will be served downstairs. And you'll find when you come back this afternoon, we'll be going into our workshop session, which will be an interactive session where you'll get to share your thoughts on where we should be going as an engineering industry and profession, looking at inclusive outcomes. On the back of your badges, there is a number which will tell you the table that you'll be on this afternoon. When you registered, you gave us a couple of lines about who you are and what you're interested in, and we've used that to be able to try and curate different groups that will be able to speak to the different topics that we'll be looking at really well this afternoon. So when you come back, if you could sit on those tables, so then we are ready to start, that would be wonderful. As we sign off for now, if we could please just thank our micro talk speakers one more time. Thank you ever so much.